And joining us now from the airport in Warsaw are Rabbis Mark Fishman and Rabbi Ruben Poukpo. And we're also joined by Janice Arnold, the correspondent in Montreal for the CJN. Welcome all to the CJN Daily.
Thank you.
So you're about to head back, rabbis, to Canada after a whirlwind fact-finding tour. First of all, you also had a busy day today. Tell us what you saw today.
Well, today we went to a center in Lublin where there are refugees gathering. It's actually a Jewish building, the old rabbinical seminary of Lublin, Yeshivat Chachmei Lublin, which has been turned into a welcoming point. We also saw there the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, who was here in Poland from Israel, Nachman Shai, was there also providing aid. I have to tell you, and I read with Rabbi Fishman and Rabbi Shai yesterday, what we saw at the border that's taking place there on behalf of the state of Israel is remarkable. They were the first ones on the ground talking about worldwide Hatzalah and Magen David Adom. What they are doing on the ground, no one else has been able to do. They are their emissary is actually traveling every single morning from the border crossing in Poland, from Mietka, across the border into Lviv, bringing pharmaceutical needs for so many, every single morning, risking the border crossing in two directions and providing aid. They were the first ones at the border 2 weeks ago. They've been there ever since, living under harrowing conditions, and they've been able to put together a body of supplies that go in literally every single morning into Ukraine. And to see the Israeli flag there and to see the emissaries of the state of Israel on the ground, it's remarkable because they're not there for the Jewish community, members of the community that are leaving Ukraine. They're there for everybody, and it's a remarkable display of heroism and compassion. We talked to the same people who were on the ground in Haiti, the first ones in Haiti. Now they're the first ones on the ground at the border, and every Jew should be proud.
Rabbi Fishman, you actually were doing your, CNN, CBC, Canadian Jewish News correspondent, video there right at the tent. You said that it was incredible to see. Tell us what it looked like when you went in there, actually inside the tent.
So the first thing that you see are women and children. There's very few men who are by foot walking across the border. And all that they are carrying with them is a backpack and very little else. And when you look into their faces, their eyes are full of fear and hopelessness. I can't imagine what it must feel like to pick up a singular tiny bag and leave one's home. The security and comfort of one's bed, of one's house, and walk over to a different country. And the first thing, as my colleague Rabbi Poukpo just pointed out, the first thing they were greeted by was the state of Israel. Now, it was a small tent. It was a tiny tent, and it was cold. But the first thing that a refugee fleeing for their lives from the Ukraine is greeted by is the state of Israel. Inside the tent, it is full of medicines. And there are teams of people on relay coming in constantly, daily, with streams of new medicines of every type and variety, refilling these shelves so that anybody who needs any type of medical aid or assistance is provided it.
I want to mention one other group. Many Canadians know a man named Zvi Sperber. He runs something called J-Roots, which until the pandemic was involved in taking groups of young Jewish students into Poland on a monthly basis. And therefore he has deep ties in Poland. He has now transformed his entire organization into an aid organization. We were with him at the train station in Mietka, which is very adjacent to an old Jewish shtetl, Przemysl. And to see these places that are associated with some of the greatest moments in Jewish history, of the flourishing creativity of Eastern European Jewry, but also associated with the worst chapter in human history, because we know what happened to everyone there, nearly everyone there, and now transformed into a border crossing for refugees fleeing in a different direction, but fleeing across the same border that so many of our people crossed some 80 years ago, and to see Jews now not in the position of victims, but the position of aid givers is a remarkable transformation. And to see tangibly how our people, how we've learned from the past, how we've taken our own experience and transformed it into kindness and goodness, and taken our own experience and learned from it to never tolerate what happened to us happening to anybody else in any shape or form. To see that on the ground, whether it's Svi Sperber from J-Roots, which is funded by Federation CJN to a certain extent in Montreal and other federations, what J-Roots is doing, what the state of Israel is doing, what Hatzalah is doing, I have to tell you, it's an inspiration. But again, the overwhelming feeling after having experienced and seen what we've seen the last couple of days is just the heartbreak over the tragedy. The tragedy is enormous. There's over 2 million refugees today. That number may go to 4 or 5 million. Poland cannot handle this alone. No country should be put in the position of handling this alone. The entire Western world needs to step up in terms of aid and opening their doors. The Polish people have been fantastic. Polish people have opened their homes to strangers. We just met a rabbi in Warsaw who had 5 people sleeping in his house the last week. It's the generosity by the entire spectrum of Polish life is really something to behold.
Something which is so powerfully, if I can just add something which is so powerfully a footnote to that comment, is really the Jewish principle found in the Torah of not hating an Egyptian. If there would be any nation that the Jewish people would naturally harbor resentment and animosity towards, it would be the Egyptians. And the reason given, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Notwithstanding the brutality that we suffered at their hands, we were residents in their land. And I am struck by the fact that, yes, the brutality, and sometimes murderously so, that the Jewish community has suffered in Ukraine and in Poland. And yet it is the Jewish people, whether represented by on-the-ground aid organizations or extensions of Israeli NGOs, it is an incredible irony that can give hope in this darkness, that it is us who have suffered so much persecution who are at the forefront of giving help and assistance.
I want to pick up on what you said. You are rabbis. You obviously went. Did you wear your kippahs? Were you? They knew you were Jewish. Did you experience any anti-Semitism or any funny looks or what have you when you were in Poland? Or
but I will tell you though, is when the Jewish refugees see us there, when they see Hatzalah. Again, the overwhelming majority of the refugees are, of course, not Jewish. But those who are, who see the Israeli flag, who see us wearing a kippah, and they come over to us, pointing to themselves and going, Shloima, Shloima, meaning I'm a Jew, is really a host of very unforgettable encounters. And thankfully, we're able to help a little bit.
Why did you go? What purpose is such a lightning trip to go? I'd love to hear from Rabbi.
There are 2 basic reasons to go. One, to bear witness, to become an informed advocate, and the other was just to provide whatever assistance we could. And thankfully, we were given the opportunity to help some people.
I think we are not naive. This was less than a drop in the ocean. When we made the decision on the spur of the moment, just days before we took the plane, we did not realize the scope. And even today, the magnitude of this is still unfolding. We could be dealing with something in a month from now, in a year from now, where we will look back and say, this was the origin of this catastrophe. So the first thing we have to realize is to be a little humble. This is an ongoing humanitarian crisis. Number 2, we went not because we were going to solve the problem or make a dent in this problem, but because a singular human being is worthy of an entire world. And to make one difference to one person is to save an entire world. That's why we went.
So were you able to bring anything from Canada with you? If so, what, whether it's money or supplies?
We came with numerous suitcases. We are going back with nothing but hand luggage. We gave away all of the clothes we came with. We had suitcases full of winter coats. It's extremely cold in Europe in March, and everything that we had in our possession, even petty cash, We were simply giving everything away.
And this came from your congregation or from your own personal families?
Oh, yes, and yes, all of the above. There were generous people in the congregation, there were generous people in our communities, and we ourselves have discretionary means that we were able to hand out, and all of the above.
You saw children sleeping in a train station, Rabbi Fishman, and you gave them balloons. It's heartbreaking. How do you process that? And how do you then deal with what you're leaving them to go back? And what's this about? How do you feel about that?
You know, when I said goodbye to my children, the youngest of whom is 4 years old, I had a conversation with her and I said, "Batsheva, why am I going?" And we had spoken about it earlier in the day, and her answer was, "Because of the Jewish people." And that was on her level as a 4-year-old, her level of understanding. And I said, I'm going to help the Jewish people. So when I walked into a train station of children, some infants, and there were even newborns, I immediately thought of my 4-year-old daughter and my other children. And it is a jarring, shocking, harrowing moment, because you immediately put yourself into that reality of there by the grace of God go I. There is no reason that is not me and that is them. And we are simply fortunate of the circumstances with which the lottery of our lives have been born. We here today living in Canada, in the freedom of a democracy in North America, there by the grace of God go we. And it is just a heartbreaking situation to see children as refugees with nothing.
Tell me what the most surprising thing was for you, Rabbi Poukpo. We heard from Rabbi Fishman about the children. What was yours?
You know, to me, the most surprising thing was the numbers of Polish people who have come forward to volunteer and to open their homes, as I mentioned. Because often you hear about refugee crisis and the political turmoil which follows, and debates in countries about how open doors or borders should be. In Poland today, there is no dispute, there is no controversy. Everyone understands their obligation, they're pouring in, and they're opening their wallets, their hearts. You know, we were at a refugee center the other day in Warsaw, it was, and kids bringing toys that they had just received, giving toys away to kids who had just come from Ukraine. It is really a beautiful sight to see, and it gives hope. Ultimately, it gives hope. You know, there are a lot of lessons to be learned here. Rabbi Fishman mentioned the need to be grateful for who we are and where we live. And it's also a moment for us, it's a clarifying moment for everyone, it should be, as to not to take freedom for granted, to be grateful, but also to understand how petty are some of the disputes that take so much of our time and attention in North America, and how insignificant they seem in the face of this moment. And therefore, everyone should be called upon to step forward in whatever way they can to assist in the aftermath of this unprovoked war being waged by Putin. To step up and to do what anyone can, to contribute, to volunteer, to do what you can to help.
So what are you going to do when you get back home now? What's the next steps for the two of you? And also, why is Rabbi Shire staying on?
Rabbi Shire's, his plans were a little in flux, had to do with something else really with his daughter, but he'll be staying on until Friday. He came with his daughter, which is really quite a remarkable education for her. But what we plan on doing when we get home is talking about this and encouraging our communities and encouraging our organizations to do whatever they can. And also, very important, what we did is not spectacular or heroic. It's very easy to do. You go to the airport, you fly. You know, it's very easy to hook up with the aid organizations to help out for a day, a week, a month. And if there's medical professionals in Canada who want to come and help, there's certainly a desperate need for medical professionals. In other words, we're going back to encourage members of our community to step up, to do what they can, even to take the trip and to go see for themselves and to help. It would be a wonderful thing. So we're encouraging greater involvement in the cause.
Rabbis, did you meet anybody who has family in Canada that you're able to now connect them? What do you do? Tell us about that a little bit.
We have a couple of people we know, even before we left, we were told about family members that were already in Poland or on their way to Poland who need help. It's a very complicated issue. Getting refugee status in Canada is not simple. and there's a queue. There are Afghanis that are already in the queue, and it's not a simple process. But we've connected them with the right people, and hopefully the process will move quickly.
Okay, before we go, I want to ask you, you mentioned right at the top of our interview, going into the border area was a bit dangerous. What did you mean by that? That you said that they risk their lives every day going in across the border?
No, I was talking about those who cross the border. They're crossing the border into the Ukraine, where there's of course a war going on. So they're crossing the border.
But you mentioned even they were risking their lives to come across from Ukraine to, or it was risky. What does that mean?
Right.
I'm not clear.
No, that means there's a war going on, and they're crossing every day from Poland into the Ukraine, into the war zone. They're crossing into the war zone to deliver pharmaceutical needs there.
Right, but do you see soldiers, right, when you guys were at the border area?
There are Polish soldiers on the Polish side, but there are no Russian soldiers, for example, at the Ukrainian-Polish border.
Right, and you guys were right up there at the
Correct.
but you didn't go into Ukraine. You didn't cross.
No.
Why not? Why not?
We were staring at it. It was 20 meters from where we were.
What did you see?
We saw truckloads of medicines being loaded up and driven into the Ukraine. Everyone is coming out.
Everyone else is coming out.
It's a one-way street. The only people who are going in are people taking medicines. However, we were given assistance with a Polish tour guide that was part of our group, and he mentioned to me that there were a few young men in their 20s who were walking in the direction towards the Ukraine. And he said to me that these were Ukrainians. He recognized them. He saw that they were not Poles, and actually that they had been either recruiting others or picking up ammunition to take in with them. They had significant suitcases, and we did notice certain individuals, as we pointed out to us, that were actually entering the Ukraine.
And are most people coming across the border where you are by bus, or there's a lot of walking people? I hear a lot of people are literally walking.
There's walking. Listen, there are trains all the time. We spoke to a woman who got on a bus in Odessa. It usually takes 7 hours to get to Warsaw. It took her close to 30 hours. Some are coming by bus, coming on foot. They're coming by train. There are trains leaving Lviv all the time into the Mayetka and other border crossing areas. They're coming any way they possibly can. We also, on the highway, you see a lot of cars in eastern Poland with Ukrainian license plates. People have simply gotten in their cars and driven across. So they're coming any way they can into Poland to find refuge.
Is there any links that you would recommend that we put up for Canadians who want to donate, or what are they asking for mostly?
The best thing that can be done right now is to help the organizations that are helping. Federation CJN in Montreal and the Federation of Toronto have special designated funds, and the money's getting immediately transferred to the aid groups on the ground. The shipping of supplies would probably be limited to pharmaceuticals. Everything else can be quickly acquired on the ground in Poland and elsewhere, Moldova and other places. And the Joint Distribution Committee is doing a wonderful job, the JDC. So to get resources to the Jewish organizations or any organization on the front line of helping people is the best and in many ways the easiest way to help.